Good morning, sailors. So yesterday for math, you should have completed that quiz code at home and at least spent 15 minutes on the Alex program for a grade yesterday. So today we're going to do some review of everything we've talked about in chapter 2. We are going to practice changing, we got percents, decimals to fractions, and fractions, percents to decimals, and then fractions and decimals to percents. So this is going to be kind of a review from the lessons we've done so far. So you're going to need this paper from your crew teacher, or if you're virtual, you can pull it up on your computer, write it on a piece of paper, or print it. You're also going to need your foldable out as well, because that's going to help us. So grab your foldable right now. Alrighty, I have my foldable here. So the first problem, it says a percent to a fraction. So what you should be doing when you do problems like this in our book or for warm up on that quiz, use your resources. Use your foldable. Write down the problem in your notebook to make sure you are practicing and trying your best to your full potential. So we've got percent to fraction. Where's that one? Here it is. Put the number over 100, drop the percent sign, and simplify. All right, here we go. Let's do this together. 25 over 100. And it says simplify. Well, I know I can simplify because the one ends in a 5 and one ends in a 0. So I'm going to divide by 5. And that's going to give me 5 over 20. So this percent and this fraction are equivalent. The next one is a decimal to fraction. Right here it is. Write the number as a fraction with a denominator of 10, 100, or 1,000, then simplify. So how would I read that? Okay, well, it's 2 decimal places. Here's my decimal point. 1, 2, that's the hundredths place. So I'm going to read it as 45 hundredths. So 45 hundredths. And then again, simplify. So I'm going to divide by a common factor. Again, they end in 5 or 0, so we're going to divide by 5. And that gets us 20 again as my denominator. How many times does 5 go into 45? 9. So 9 twentieths and 45 hundredths are equivalent. One's a decimal, one's a fraction. So I would not write this as 0.9 or 9.20 as a decimal. It is 45 hundredths. So we're going to have another one that's a decimal as a fraction. And this is actually a mixed number. How do I read that decimal number? I read it as 1 and, the decimal point we refer to with the word and, 2, it's in the first decimal place, tenths. So 1, a big 1, and the fraction is 2 tenths. Now we simplify. What could I divide 2 and 10 by? They're both even, so that would be a 2. So my whole number stays 1. 2 divided by itself is 1. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So 1 and 2 tenths is simplified to be 1 and 1/5 as a mixed number. Next up, write the following as decimals. That's a fraction, so look at your foldable. Fraction to decimal. Here we are. Divide the numerator by the denominator. Okay, that's if we had to use a calculator. We don't need a calculator for this one because we want to get the denominator to be 10, 100, or 1,000. It is 5. That's friendly. So we're going to times this by something to get a denominator of 10. Well, 5 goes into 10 2 times, so I times it by 2. And whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. 4 times 2 is 8. Now write that as a decimal. The tenths place has 1 0, so it's 1 decimal place. Bring your numerator over and put it right there. So 4/5 as a decimal is 8/10. The next one is percent to decimal. My foldable says, divide the percent by 100, drop the percent sign, or move the decimal 2 spots to the left. So we'll do both ways. We'll do 65/100ths, which as a decimal, I would write it with 2 zeros. Boom, boom. Means 2 decimal places, then move the numerator over. So that's how you write it as a decimal, or like you were shown, earlier, a percent, the decimal point's imaginary. It's after the 5. So we're going to move it 2 spots to the left because we want it to be a decimal, and a decimal has an L in it. So 1, 2, you would get the same thing, 0.65. So either put it over 100 and then write it as a decimal number, or move the decimal spot 2 spots to the left. All right, back to a fraction to a decimal. We have to get the denominator to be 10, 100, or 1,000. Well, it is currently 20. I can't go down to 10 because I can't simplify 3. So we're going to times it by something to get 100. Think of how many times 20 goes into 100. That would be 5 times. And whatever I do to the denominator, I do to the numerator. And 3 times 5 is 15. Now write it as a decimal. Okay, the hundredths. That's 2 zeros, so that means it's 2 decimal places. Take the numerator and put it in the spots available. So 3/20ths as a decimal is 15/100ths. Alrighty, moving on to the last section here. Write the following as percents. That is a fraction to percent. So find your foldable, fraction to percent. Find an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator. Add percent to the sign to the new numerator. Well, boys and girls, does 15 go into 10, 100, or 1,000? No, it does not. So for this one, we're going to simplify first. I know they share a common factor, so I can try this route. 3 goes into both of them. So I'm going to write down 3/5. 5's a little friendlier number. Now I need my denominator to be 100, as my foldable says, because a percent is always out of 100. Now I can times 5 by 20 to get 100. And then I would do the same thing to the top of that fraction. 3 times 20 is 60. And then my new numerator is my percent. It is 60%. So 9/15, that fraction is equivalent to 60%. Okay, the next one, number 8, is a decimal to percent. All right, where's that at on my foldable? Here it is. Multiply by 100, add the percent sign, or move the decimal point 2 places to the right. There's an R in percent, so we're going to go to the right. I'll show you both ways. Go to the right twice, boom, there's my percent. Or it also said to put it over, multiply by 100, which would be the same thing. If you're multiplying by 100, you're moving the decimal point twice to the right because there's 2 zeros and 100. So that one should have been fairly easy for you, 72%. And then the last one, some of you probably already know what this is as a percent without doing any work. But we're going to go fraction to percent again. Find an equivalent fraction with 100 as the denominator, add the percent sign. So here are my examples for 3/4. So I can just look at that and say, oh, I know I got to times it by 25 to get 100 as my denominator. And then whatever I do to the bottom, I'm going to do to the top. So we're going to mimic that example, just with a different numerator. So like that example showed us, we're going to times by 25. 100 is my new denominator. 25 is my numerator. 25 out of 100 would be 25%. Okay, one more. Number 10. A dog spends about 7 out of 10 hours sleeping. About what percent of a dog's day is spent awake? Well, that tells me when it's sleeping, but the question wants to know when it's awake. So you could do this a couple of different ways. I'm going to write this as a fraction first. And then I'm going to change that to a percent. Fraction 2%. We just did a couple of those. Got to get the denominator to be 100. How many times does 10 go into 100? I'm going to move this up. I know some of you sit away from the screen and you want to see a little better. That would be 10 times. What's 7 times 10? 70. That is 70%. Would that be my answer? No, because it wants to know about what percent of a dog's day is spent awake. That's sleeping. So we know percent's always out of 100. Some of you probably know what to do. We're going to take 100 and we're going to take 70 away from it. We have to find the difference, and that would be 30%. So we can say a dog spends 30% of the day awake. There you go. All right, there's a little quick review of Chapter 2. Use this worksheet to help you for a future quick check or test coming up in a couple of weeks. And I believe you're going to watch another video by Mrs. Schaefer and work on a page in your book. See you tomorrow.